In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the budget sheet that I designed. And this budget sheet is intended for a family of two, and ideally a family of two partners. They do not both have to have an income, but the two partner thing really matters because it gives a separate category for each partner to have a little bit of spending money for themselves. And it adds a category for a date night, which can be really helpful for folks' relationships. So once you've gotten the template, which can be purchased on Etsy, you open it up and this would be the first tab would have budget theory. And when you look along the bottom, there's a lot of different tabs. So I'm going to make separate videos that show you how to actually use this so that you get value out of it and you really feel equipped to handle this. That being said, if you also want to set up a time to consult and set this up together and walk you through or answer any questions, I am more than happy to do so. Please reach out to me. So you'll see this first tab, budget theory, which we'll walk through. You'll see overall. So right now there's zeros everywhere. That's because we need to set some things up, okay? So first things first, you're gonna start on that budget theory page. This page you're really not gonna use super often. It's gonna be when you're setting up your budget. So your original conversation where you're sitting down as partners and talking about what is our financial situation. You should revisit and keep circling back to these things to make sure you're doing what you say you're doing and that your goals are aligning and that you're on the same page with things. But normally day to day, you're going to be actually using the budget you've set up in these month tabs later on. So that being said, you're going to start here. It's best to really only mess with the columns that are highlighted in blue. Okay, and I'm actually going to, now that I say that, make these columns that same light blue to encourage you to use the notes section. Okay, so I know this might look overwhelming. Before we do anything, let me talk you through just what this page has set up. So on the right, you can see from the infamous and wonderful Elizabeth Warren, a tip about when you're doing budgeting, if you're new at it, what may be advisable as a place to start. So Elizabeth Warren uses the 50-30-20 rule. And what that means is that 50% of your spendable income goes towards your needs, like your groceries, your rent, your medical things. 30% goes towards your wants, like date night and eating out and going on trips. And then 20% goes towards planning for the future. So saving for retirement, saving for college if you're planning to have, to pursue for future education, or you're planning to have a family, saving for that. Getting your debt under control, because of course we'd like to live as debt-free as possible. So this does not need to be an exact science, but you can see I've already divvied up what some of these categories might be, and I have it adding up to percentages. So as you are tweaking and figuring out what your budget sheet needs to look like, these numbers will adjust. Again, they don't need to be exactly 50-30-20. That's just a guideline to help you get started if it's helpful for you, okay? So the first thing you would do is you would plan out what your gross income is. So if you have set annual salaries, it's probably easiest. Otherwise, go through and try to figure out about approximately how much are we bringing home a year, okay? And if you do have incomes that tend to fluctuate, I encourage you to plan on the lower end of things, because what we don't want is to say we're going to have a bunch of money come in that then doesn't come in, and then we have lived beyond our means. So it's always better to go on the lower end if you're not 100% sure. So let's say that you both are making you're bringing in funds. Even if not, it doesn't matter, you'll just put the gross income. But let's say both partners are making about $50,000 a year. So what you could do is type in, you can add them or just put the total. So when I type in 50,000 plus 50,000, make sure you put the equal signs, and then Excel will do that math for you. It puts that you're making $100,000 a year. You can see when I do that, it automatically changed all of these numbers from zero, okay? So right off the bat, it takes out taxes, because most employers are probably going to take out taxes before the paycheck even gets to you, okay? This number, of course, with tax law and things, and depending what income bracket you're in, this percentage that taxes takes might vary. It also might vary depending what state you live in. Some states, for example, Tennessee, does not have a state income tax, whereas other states do have a state income tax. So you might need to change this number, and in order to do so and get the best tax percentage for you, I encourage you to talk to a financial advisor so that you can really sit down and talk about all of your financial situation and what taxes you can anticipate will come out. Okay, so once you do that, it tells you about how much yearly is going to be paid to taxes and about how much a month that is. And then this net spendable income tells you how much money you're really going to have to work with in your budget once you have done your duty of paying taxes. Okay? So now you'll have to figure out about how much a month you want for each budget area. Okay? So I already have some basic percentages built in here. And so I know they are decimals. It's the same thing as a percent. If you would rather work in percents, you can hit this percent button and it will help you work in percents. But I prefer the decimals. Okay? So these things can ebb and flow as needed. Just because it's set that way doesn't mean that this has to be exactly what you live by. This is why it's important for you two to sit down together and figure out when you're getting started, what do we need to be on the same page about. Okay, so for example, this rent that was set was a $14.85 a month. So rent or a mortgage. And I encourage you to lump in your property tax if you have a mortgage, and you can lump in your homeowner's insurance into that too. It's up to you. Or you can put it in this insurance category. So let's say that you actually don't spend this much on rent in your mortgage. You spend $1,300. So you can just manually fiddle with this number until that gets to 13. So you know that you need to set aside less. So you could try setting aside less and see what it does. Or the way to actually find out the exact number would be to take that number that you know you actually spend a month and divide it by your monthly income. And this tells you that percentage, that 0.20129 is how much this number needs to be to give you exactly that. Okay, so it's up to you if you want to do it the exact way or approximations, because again, this is just a guide to help us live within our means. It doesn't mean that you're going to spend exactly $1,304.58 for most people. Okay, so you'll fiddle with all of these different categories, and it's best to do this when you have an idea of what you currently spend. So you know, we tend to spend more on utilities every month, or our insurance tends to be more. Well, then you know that you need to adjust those categories, okay? So while you're adjusting these categories, keep an eye on this total button. This total, if you go over 1, which let me show you, it will turn red. That is telling you you're spending more than you're making, and this isn't feasible, okay? So at the end, when you're done, you need this column to be green so that you're living within your means. You're not spending more than you're making, okay? So keep fiddling with this. If you end up being below 1, that's okay. That just means you're going to have some extra money that isn't accounted for, and you can always just throw that extra money into the savings column, which is really building up a nest egg in case you ever need it. This is a good thing to have set aside so that, if God forbid someone lost their job or had a medical issue, you have money set aside for several months to keep your family afloat while you try to get your feet back on the ground. It's a good thing, like I said, to have this build up over time to be enough money that you all could survive on it for months if needed. That's another thing to talk about, to talk strategy with a financial planner for your particular situation and how much that savings should really be set aside at the end. Okay, so rent and mortgage, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. It's going towards your home. So you can decide as a partner, you can write any rules or things that you both want to be on the same page about in this column. It's good to have it in writing so that it's encouraging you to talk about it and make sure that you both interpret things the same way. So you set all of these things up. So auto, it could include car payments if you want it, or if you own a car, just the gas, the maintenance on the car, whatever. Insurance, deciding what that insurance is going to be. Cell phone, making sure that you're prepared for any phone bills for you and your family. Medical, my family and I use this as our co-pays and anything like that. We do not use it to talk about what's deducted from our paycheck for health insurance. That has a separate thing down here, okay? Hygiene, I use this for haircuts, personal needs like buying razors or shampoo, anything that's not really groceries, but it is a necessity. Groceries, of course, is what we use to buy food. Some folks choose to have beer, wine, alcohol come out of this as well, and some people don't. So that's something you might want to talk about, and you might want to set as a rule that you've decided. So you might write in here, alcohol comes out of this unless we are over budget. And if you're over budget, then that means that the person has to buy that additional alcohol out of their entertainment or what have you. Okay, so you'll go through and you'll make your rules about these things. I encourage you to use this date night column and have a little bit of money set aside that encourages you to spend time and some money on your relationship. And that way you're not worried about, ooh, we don't have enough money to go do that activity together. You have some money set aside. It doesn't need to be a lot, but just something so that you have that ability to put a little bit of time towards your relationship. Entertainment money, this seems pretty high to me. We actually have it be about $100 a month, which works really well. And this is money that that person wants to spend on whatever they want to do. So if that person, one of the partners wants to go to Cedar Point, it could be their mission. If they want to go to the movies, it could be paying their movie ticket. It's that way you're not saying and getting jealous between partners of, well, this person's getting to do more than I'm getting to do. You each have your own little entertainment money that is just for you to spend how you want, and you don't have to ask permission or check with the other person. Really is a good thing for relationships, for you each to have a little bit of your own funds. Clothing, anything that you need to buy. Trips, we use this as camping sites, hotels, any kind of trips that we're taking. Pet, if you have one. If you don't have one, then you could set this column to 0 right away because you know you don't need to set aside any money monthly for it. Okay, but we use this for grooming appointments for our pet, food, anything like that. Miscellaneous is completely up to you. It could be a catch-all, could be where you put alcohol, whatever. Good idea to set aside some money for gifts as well because those sorts of things add up over time. And so making sure that you have a little bit of money set aside that's going to cover any gifts you might buy around the holidays, any nieces or nephew gifts, gifts for each other can be in here. It's completely up to you. Charitable, I encourage you to set a little money aside so that you can support others and causes that are important to you, such as through GoFundMe's, donating to a local nonprofit. If you're religious and you do a religious tithe, like a percentage of your income, this helps you prioritize those charitable things and set that money aside. We have made a rule in our home that we have to agree on where the charitable money is going to. And that way, if one thing is really important to one partner but not to the other, you've talked ahead of time about how that's going to work in your home. For example, if one partner is religious and the other is not, you should really talk about, are you both comfortable with that religious tithe, or how is there a way that you can adapt to compromise for both people? You do not have to set aside anything for big trips, but my partner and I set aside money for big trips, like going on an all-inclusive resort trip. One day we'd love to go to Europe, but these things are separate goals that we're saving for, and they'll take a lot of time to save for, but it's good to have a little money set aside if that's important to you. So debt, I'm going to skip savings, come back to it. Debt is the column for if you have credit card debt, if you have student loans, you should know pretty much what you need to pay on those things a month. And so making sure that this monthly is fitting or more or exceeding what you need to pay. That way you're trying to get that debt down. Investments is if you have anything that comes out of your paycheck automatically, such as for a 401k or a 403b. Set aside what comes out of your paycheck. I wouldn't include your employer match here. This is really just, again, because that money is not actually coming home, so you don't want to commit it somewhere else. Or if there's any other paycheck withdrawals. For example, at one of my jobs, I had to pay for my parking, and it came directly out of my paycheck. So I needed to set that here. That way, I wouldn't commit that money somewhere else. You also will want to put what comes out of your paycheck for any health insurance, again, so you don't commit that money somewhere else. Roth IRA contributions, it's advisable for each individual person to put about $6,000 a year aside. So that's about $12,000 a year for a couple. This has tax advantages and helps all of us to save for retirement. So I encourage you to do this and to prioritize it and put it in your budget. And I encourage you to reach out to a financial planner so that you are preparing well for retirement and making these Roth IRA contributions. I'm lucky that my family happens to be financial planners, and I highly recommend jacqui.ewasyshyn. He's wonderful. He explains everything, and he's helping me save a lot so that one day I will be able to retire. Okay. The last column that we didn't talk about is savings. So I encourage you to set some money aside every month. The goal of it is just intended for you to be saving money. And this is good so that long term, if you have unexpected costs arise that you have to pay, for example, a car mechanical issue or something like that, you have some money set aside to pay it. Okay. Again, you want this to build up so that you have enough to live on for several months. And that's something you should talk about with your financial planner, about how much money really should be in that nest egg in case it's needed. So once you have talked about this might take a while, and again, I'm happy to consult if needed, but you figure out your different percentages and your monthly incomes. When you've done this, it automatically is going to fill in on the budget, the overall sheet, what you decided that monthly budget is going to look like. And it also will have filled in on every single month what you have budgeted for that specific category. So we'll proceed further in the next video, but that's really the first step, is creating what your budget template and theory is going to be for your family, for your home.